Councilmember Nixon.
Here.
Councilmember Black.
Here.
Councilmember Curtis.
Here.
Councilmember Falcone.
Here.
Councilmember Pascal.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Arnold.
Here.
Mayor Sweet.
Our study session tonight is on two topics. The first is the 2023-2025 mid-biennial budget update. The second topic is the 2023-2028 capital improvement program update. We expect to reconvene our regular meeting in approximately 7 weeks. City Manager.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So to give us our first update on the mid-biennial budget update is our financial planning manager, George Dugdale. And we did reverse this. Those who saw the previous agenda, we reversed the two topics because the budget overview kind of feeds into the CIP. So George will be going first, and he'll be followed by the second topic afterward. So take it away, George.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor, council members. Just going to share the screen here. Okay, great. So we have a total of 30 slides across the mid-buy and the CIP update for you. We'll try to get through those relatively quickly so we can leave lots of time for council questions and comments. So I have 19 slides on the mid-buy budget update, and then as the City Manager said, I'll hand over to Kevin Pelstring for the remainder, which is the CIP slides. Okay. So before I get into the content, I just want to go through exactly what we'll be covering. So firstly, a financial overview that covers the changes to the general fund forecast, as well as revenue expenditures and inflationary impacts. And then we're going to quickly touch on the progress we've made implementing the 2023-2024 service packages, which is a good barometer of how departments and the city overall has been doing in implementing the council's direction from that budget. And we do have some mid-biennial adjustments, both service packages and other adjustments, and finish just with an update on the recent growth in the city's budget and the size of the overall reserves. So on the financial overview, I have slides on each of these things, but there's really three key takeaways that I think that summarize what's been happening since we began the budget in January 2023. So general fund revenues are above budget, but have been reduced by a one-time sales tax refund in 2023. So sales taxes were trending about 5% ahead of budget. The Department of Revenue reached out to the city and said that in our October distribution, there was a court-ordered settlement which returns about $1.5 million of sales tax, which we received in 2020. Due to that, sales taxes will be more like budget in 2022, which, as a reminder, is a 0% growth from 23. We anticipate revenues being above budget in 2024, with sales taxes being close to their 23 level. For general fund expenditures, they're trending above budget at the moment, primarily due to overtime, particularly in the fire department. This is particularly notable because we have fewer budgetary savings than in recent budget cycles. This is partly due to the work that departments have done to hire their staffing. We have fewer vacancies when we had certainly at any point in the last few years. But also tied to the final point there, the impact of high inflation in 2021 and 2022 in particular has started feeding through into the price that we pay for lots of things, particularly in our internal service funds. And so costs for the same items have increased, and we'll see that a few times as I go through the presentation. So a bit more of a deep dive on general fund revenues. As I mentioned, sales taxes in 2023 are anticipated to be at budget. We expect them to be close to where they would have been. In 2024, we expect them to be close to where they would have been had we not had the one-time refund. So we think they'll end the biennium about 2.5% ahead of budget. As we discussed at the Council's May retreat, utility taxes are ahead of budget in 2023, which we expect to continue into 2024. This is mostly because of large rate increases on the private utility side, which were larger than we had thought they might be, and so that's feeding through into utility taxes. One update from May is revenue generating regulatory license, which is the per FTE business fee. This is slightly below budget, but revenues in the second half of 2023 have actually been better than they were in the first half. This is at least in part because finance and the staff in the finance department have been reaching out to large businesses who we had some renewals earlier in the year that either hadn't come through or had come through at very much lower numbers than in previous years. And so we've seen an uptick in those revenues as some companies have responded to those. The final big category that I want to mention is investment interest. This you can see in the table. We're expecting it to be about $2.6 million above budget across the 2 years. which is about 40% ahead of budget. This is partly because we anticipated interest rates would fall further than they have, and so investment returns are still higher, and also because the cash balance in the general fund is higher than we thought it would be, potentially due to timing and differences in the timing of payments. On the expenditure side, I want to spend most of the time here talking about personnel expenditures. So as I mentioned, we're expecting personnel expenditures to actually be running ahead of budget at the end of 2024. This includes cost of living adjustments, which we have budgeted for. The primary reason for this is fire overtime. However, I should mention that fire overtime is actually running lower in 2023 than it did in 2022, and we anticipate it running lower still in 2024. It will still be ahead of budget, however. The reason that the overall personnel remains ahead of budget is partly because we don't have the vacancy savings that we've had in recent bienniums. So we've had fire overtime significantly above budget, but that's been more than offset by large vacancy savings, particularly in 21 and 22. The other reason is that we have some overhire positions, particularly in the fire department, that were added in May. So when those were originally unfunded when they were added, and staff said that we would assess their impact and we would bring back to council solutions for funding that. And so now that we see halfway through the biennium that the impact on personnel costs is significant, staff is proposing that we wait until the end of this year, because, as I said, overtime is moderating. We also anticipate a number of retirements in the fire department now that the IFF contract is settled. When we originally proposed the overhires, we thought the IFF contract would settle earlier in the year. So if there are retirements in the fire department early in 2024, that number for personnel will come down. But staff's plan is to bring back to the May retreat a proposal that would fund the personnel overage in the fire departments and any other departments for the rest of 2024. So beyond personnel, discretionary savings are projected to be relatively low, well, actually very low in 23-24. This is largely due to, for two reasons. Largely because of inflation, as I previously mentioned, which is running higher and has increased the costs of supplies and services. But also, as we've hired more positions and as we've reduced the number of vacancies that we have, there has been an uptick in spending on supplies and services as new staff come on board. So discretionary items are expected to be very, very close to budget by the end of 2024. I should say that we in previous years, we have asked departments this year, as in previous years, to be quite conservative with their estimates of their expenditures. And so what that means on the expenditure side is that they're often estimating higher than what actually comes in. So when we have the full year results in 2023, we will know whether that's the case again this year, and there may be more discretionary savings than we're showing right now. But for the purposes of projection and the purposes of budgeting out 2024, we're showing it as presented by departments. Okay, I'm going to move more specifically into the inflationary increases that we're seeing. So in the memo that was presented to council, there were 4 examples given. And these aren't necessarily the largest examples, they're just examples that came up during the mid-buy process in terms of just the cost of increases that we've seen for the same services. So on the healthcare side, the cost of a clinic visit has risen 25%, and a routine office visit, which excludes the VERA, because that's paid via a fixed cost, has increased by 13%. And this is since 2020. And then on the fleet side, both the purchase of vehicles, you can see one example there, which has increased nearly 40%, and some routine fleet equipment has increased by over 30%. And so we're seeing large increases. And the cost comparator here is 2020, but the real increase has been in the last 2 years since 2021. So as you can see, costs have been escalating quite quickly. It's worth noting this doesn't line up perfectly with the inflation increases, which started in 21 and peaked in 2022. But as we're buying, that has taken a while to filter through the system. And so we are seeing the increases of the inflation in 2022 in services that we're purchasing in 23 and even in 2024. For example, in IT, we have a number of software subscription renewals for the 2024 year, which are higher than we had assumed in the budget, and it's because of the inflation pressures from the last couple of years. Okay. So as I've mentioned a couple of times, the inflationary increases, they are happening across the budget, but they're having a particular impact on our internal service funds. And so, and as it says up there, the total cost of healthcare claims has risen by 50% between 2022 and 2023. This is not all due to inflation. Some of this, our healthcare consultants believe, is we had a very, very low baseline cost in 2022, much lower than other organizations that they saw. So some of it is a return to kind of reversion to the mean, as they said. Some of it is because we have more staff members than previous years, and so that leads some of the costs. But a good portion of the cost is just the increase in, and then there's also a portion due to large claimants, but a good portion is just to the inflation in the cost of routine healthcare. And there's been news articles recently to that effect as well, that just routine healthcare costs have gone up a lot in the last couple of years. This has been seen across our other internal service funds as well, although not necessarily to the same extent. The other most notable one is the fleet fund. I showed some examples on the previous slide of the kind of cost increases in the fleet fund that we've seen in the last couple of years. And so those two funds, but all of the internal service funds in particular, are seeing the increases of the inflation in the budget. The reason these four funds are seeing that, perhaps more than some of the other funds, is that particularly in the case of health benefits and fleet, they're less dependent on staffing costs, which are more predictable to us, and less dependent on some of the external pressures than some of our other funds, which have a lot of staffing in them. And so the impact of this, as you can see, is that we have some large overages projected in the 2023-2024 budget cycle. It's the the third column in that table up there. The fourth column shows you that we have pretty significant unreserved fund balances in those funds. And I'll explain quickly. By unreserved fund balance, we mean reserves above either required reserves. So, for example, in the health benefits fund, we have a legally required 16 weeks of claims, which is the $1.4 million you can see on the far right. In the fleet fund, we have reserves for vehicle replacement, as well as an operating reserve, which is dictated by policy. So some of them have policy of 5% of operating costs or 10% of operating costs. So the unreserved fund balance is above those numbers. So staff proposal here is to use some of that unreserved fund balance to cover the estimated overages in 2024, and then return as part of the 2025-2026 budget process with a proposal to make these long-term cost increases more sustainable. That would take two forms. What I should say first is the reason we're proposing this is that the other option for the internal service funds is to increase the rates that other departments pay for them. So these are paid by rates from other departments. So our health benefits fund is a rate that we charge on every employee. The fleet fund, the IT fund, and the facilities fund are funded by the rates. Rate models have various mechanisms, but they are essentially allocated to other departments based on usage. And so the other option would be to increase the usage charges to other departments. That would then impact across the whole budget, and it would have wider impacts in 2024. So partly because of that, and partly because we have these unreserved fund balances, staff is proposing that we hold steady in 2024 and we make changes in 2025. That has two benefits. The first is that we can wait to see if the true impact is what we're projecting here. And the second is that it gives staff in those departments and in the finance department time to look at potential policy changes or changes that we can make that could help mitigate those rate increases. To give a sense of scale, to cover the increases we're looking at here, we're projecting that 2025 rates would need to increase about 20% for all departments. It's not consistent. IT and facilities would be lower than that, but for fleet and health benefits, we're looking at about a 20% rate increase to catch up to those costs. Okay, so what impact would this have on the forecast? Apologies if the tables are a little small. I tried to get two on the same slide. For the general fund forecast, what we've done here is roll in the inflationary adjustments that I talked about and actually make an assumption of 20% rate increases, as well as the revenue changes that I went through earlier in the slide. And so when we originally proposed the 23-24 budget, the deficit in 2025-26 was $737,000. In the May retreat, when we had rolled in some of the contract changes, the labor contract changes, that had increased slightly to just over $1 million. by rolling in the 20% rate increases, as well as accounting for some of the personnel costs, we're now looking at more like $3.5 million in 2025, 2026. A couple of caveats on this, however. The first is that this only includes ongoing costs and revenues. So it doesn't include any of our fund balances or reserves or any one-time resources that we may have in 25, 26. And so the $3.5 million shown at the bottom of the chart on the right does not mean that there will be a negative $3.5 million fund balance in the general fund. We have balances and reserves in the fund. The second is that this, as I said, this doesn't assume a 20% rate increase to both health benefits, IT, facilities, and fleet. And that may not be necessary in all of those funds. And in fact, if we make policy changes in some of those areas, we could see lower rate increases than that. But for now, the forecast as presented with the changes as part of the mid-buy shows a $3.5 million deficit. Okay, I could pause there because we're about to move into implementation of the 23-24 budget and see if there are any questions on any of the kind of cost trends that we've seen in the current year. Okay, so as this is the mid-buy, we are midway through the budget cycle. And so of the 110 service packages that were approved as part of the 23-24 budget, about 80% of them are currently complete or in progress. This has been particularly in positions where, as I've said a few times, there's been a real effort to get positions hired and get vacancies filled so that important work can be done. And in that case, 76% of positions have already been hired, so are in the complete category. So as I say, I've mentioned that a couple of times, but there have been some notable successes. For example, the Public Works Maintenance Centre was fully staffed a couple of months ago. I think there may be one vacancy now, but that's been the first time in a long time that we've been fully staffed there. Fire Prop 1 hiring has continued, and we have brought a lot of new firefighters on board and met some of the hiring targets from that ballot measure. So there's been a significant shift in our ability and to hire and the focus that we've had on it. Outside of hiring, a lot of work is underway on some of the key strategic priorities, which is outlined above. There's a lot of work around the comprehensive plan and the training capacity at Fire Station 24. And then finally, the category of not started. A good portion of those, a good portion of the dollars there are service packages which were either or always designed to be in 2024 or are dependent on the timing of other items. So, for example, the impact fee study and the general sewer plan are dependent on the timing of the comprehensive plan and the transportation master plan and some of the other planning processes. And so that they haven't started is not necessarily a negative thing. It's just the original timing called for them to start in 2024. The overall message here is that staff has worked in all departments, has worked really hard to implement the additional resources and positions that council granted as part of that budget process. Okay, so as part of the mid-biennial update, as we normally do, we have a small number of service packages that the city manager is recommending. And these are related to either the city work plan or our one-time investments in staff or other efficiencies. So over the next few slides, I have them presented by council goal area. So it'll become obvious as I go through them, but not all the goal areas have service packages associated with them. And so I'm only showing the ones where there are service packages. And as a reminder, all of the service packages and the adjustments that follow that we're going through now will be brought to council on December 12th for final approval. And so this is just the first time that we're showing them. So inclusive and equitable community. So there are 3 service packages here. 2 are one-time resources in the HR department, which there has some kind of general applicability, but are focused on the growing efforts that the department has on recruiting, public safety recruiting, and diversity recruiting. And so, as I've mentioned quite a number of times now, we've had a lot of success with hiring in 2024, and it's put additional pressure on the human resources department. So those 2 service packages would extend one-time positions. One of them would extend a one-time position in the HR department, and the second one would hire a one-time human resources assistant, which would further free up resources with the other HR analysts. Additionally, there's a service package to better accommodate council conference attendance, which mostly stopped during the COVID pandemic. And then the final service package is one time now, but will be built into the base budget or brought back as a service package for 25-26. Next is community safety. So the first service package shown there is an increase in the support for the community court program. So this is a good time to mention that a lot of these service packages apply to more than one service goal area. And in the service package forms, which were included with the council packet, the form shows all the council goals that were met with that service package. And so this is one such example. But this service package increases the FTE support for the community court program from 0.5 to 0.75 and is fully funded with a grant program. The other three service packages are one-time investments in the fire department and are all funded by Fire Prop 1 balances. So in reverse order, they are address equipment needs on fire engines and the city's reserve fire engines, provide better controls for inventory, and help the city meet the terms of an MOU that was agreed with the IFF during the recent labour negotiations. So abundant parks, open spaces, and recreational services. So the first two here are the extension of positions that supported the development of the 2023 Parks ballot measure. This funds the positions through 2024, and they'll continue their work on implementing PROS plans initiatives, as well as other support areas within the department. The final one represents the city's initial efforts to maintain and improve the newly acquired Fisk Family Park. So the cost shown here is just to fund basic maintenance of the property. So as it says, it includes mowing and weeding and other kind of standard maintenance. It's an estimate from the Parks Department. As part of the 2025-26 budget, staff will prepare a service package that implements more of a medium to long-term vision for the property and may include things like irrigation. I also want to mention that staff are still working to identify some near-term needs, and so they could see some small changes in this service package, as there are some items, potentially a bridge across the creek on the property, that are being currently looked at. If there are changes to this, we will highlight that in the December 12th memo when we bring it back to council. And the final service package is in dependable infrastructure. So the fuel lines at the old Fire Station 27, as it says, this is phase 2. They've been undergoing replacement for a while, and this service package would complete that process. So obviously the old Fire Station 27 is not currently in use, but the fuel lines very much are. They're used by not just fire department, but other departments in the north end of the city. They're open to all city staff, and so replacing them has been an important project for the Public Works Department. Okay, so moving away from service packages, some other major adjustments were identified in the memo. There's a whole table of them there. I will just walk through some of the ones that I've highlighted above the table. So firstly, Parks Levy Fund consolidation. So currently, the 2002 Parks Levy goes into a fund numbered 125, and the 2012 Parks Levy goes into a fund that's numbered 128. This creates both management and administrative complexities for the Parks Department, who have to split staff time between the two funds, split equipment purchases between the two funds. The original purpose was to delineate between the two activities of the two levies. However, we have other ways to do that now in our newer accounting system. And so for both the simplicity of the management and also the administration, we can combine those two levies into the same fund. We, if needed, would still be able to identify work, particularly specific work funded from each of the levies, rather, but that we do not need two separate funds to do this. I should say that the original intention of this was also that it would contain any funding from the 2023 Parks ballot measure, but that we were going to do the work either way. Second one is retro payments related to the IFF contract. So prior to the recent contract settlement, the firefighters were still being paid at their 2021 rates. So as is standard practice, the city had a staffing reserve, a cost of living reserve for 2023 and 24 increases. And so that portion of the retro payments is held in that reserve. However, the 2022 portion is currently held in the unreserved general fund balance. And so this adjustment would move that from the salaries, from the general fund working capital into the firefighter salary and benefit lines. The third one that I'll highlight here is the street fund. So there's a few adjustments to expenditures shown in the table, including the sign bulk material increase and the Doppler call dispatch system. The street fund, as we've talked about at previous council meetings and council retreats, has the funding mixture in the street fund has made it kind of prone to funding shortfalls in recent years. It's largely funded with property taxes. It was badly affected by COVID when gas taxes fell significantly, as well as parking revenues. So although the revenue picture is better in the street fund, given that there are adjustments here, staff is recognizing an additional $100,000 in parking infraction revenue above budget in the general fund and transferring that to the street fund. So I should say this is just based on the estimates that we have for parking infraction revenue. So the budget is $700,000 and the estimate is that we'll receive $800,000 this year. So we're proposing transferring that additional $100,000 into the street fund, which will ensure the street fund stability through the end of this biennium. So the final piece for me, before I hand over to Kevin for the capital budget, is on the growth in the city's budget and reserves. So in the past 10 years, since the adoption of the 2015-2016 budget, the overall size of the Kirkland's budget, as you can see there, has grown by 78%. So I looked at the budgets of some of our nearby neighbours, and you can see that Kirkland's is broadly in line with what other cities have seen. This is because, and as I'll explain a bit more on the next slide, this is because of kind of regional trends that have driven growth across the region and have impacted everybody. The other thing I'll say on this slide is that the total size of each budget is impacted by the amount of what we call double budgeting, which is required as part of governmental or fund accounting. What it essentially means is that some revenues are received in one fund and then transferred to another fund, and then they get counted twice. So actually an example of that would be the $100,000 I just proposed moving to the street fund. It would be recognized in the general fund, it would be transferred to the street fund, and both funds would see a $100,000 increase in their revenues. So you have to account for that when you're looking at the total size of the budget. It's actually pretty significant. With that number removed, Kirkland's budget would fall from $1.03 billion across 2 years to more like $550 million. So it accounts for nearly half the budget. Despite the fact that it does impact our budget, it also impacts everybody else's budget, and it was as true in 2015-16 as it is now. So it doesn't necessarily impact the comparison between the four cities, but it does inflate the overall size of all four budgets. So when I mention the regional trends, I'm particularly talking about large growth in development and the housing market, which has had two significant impacts on our budget. So the first is that revenues associated with development and with the housing market have grown a lot. I think in the memo I mentioned that REIT and impact fees in 2015-16, we budgeted a total of $13.4 million in those two funds, and it was close to $30 million in the 23-24. There's also been pretty substantial growth in our development activity, so revenues from fees and permits related to development have grown a lot in that time as well. So related to this, those revenues, particularly REIT and impact fees, are restricted to capital expenditures. And so the growth in that development, and the growth in that development has also necessitated infrastructure improvements. So transportation improvements, parks improvements, as well as improvements in other capital areas. And so that's also led to a pretty significant growth in the city's CIP, some of which you'll see in the next presentation. So large projects such as the fire station rebuilds, Totem Lake Connector, 132nd Square Park, all represent pretty substantial investments in the CIP that have been made over the last 10 years. So this table on here shows that all of that activity falls into what we call non-operating funds. So the general government operating funds is the general funds, the parks levy funds, the development services fund. The utility funds are related to the utilities, and then the non-operating funds are both the capital revenues as well as our CIP projects and our debt service. So a lot of it is related to capital work the city does. And you can see the overall growth by type of fund on the right-hand side of that table. So 165% growth in the non-operating funds compared to 53 and 58% growth in the operating and utility funds. So it's where a lot of the growth in the city's budget has occurred. Okay, and then the final slide from me related to the growth in the budget is about reserves. So since 2015, the total city reserves have increased from 147 million to 173 million. Many of those reserves, as it says, are targeted at percentages of other budget items. I mentioned earlier in the presentation having targeted reserves in the internal service funds that are a percentage of that budget. So we have a lot of reserves that are those targets. You'll also notice that $173 million is a smaller percentage of 1.3 billion than 147 is of the 520 million that we had in 2015-16. So even though the total absolute number has grown, the reserves as a percentage of the overall budget have not grown. So this table here shows by group all the 4 types of reserves that we have. So there's general purpose, which are reserves for a general purpose. So most of those are held in the general fund. And then we have reserves that are restricted legally. So I mentioned the health benefits fund. We have a legal requirement to hold 16 weeks of claims in reserves. We also have legal requirements around our contingency fund, which is mentioned in the RCW. And then we have reserves which are restricted by RCW. So impact fees that are held in reserve can only be used for the purpose that the impact fees were collected. We also then have the largest group, which is special and designated reserves. So these are either set aside for planned uses, so cost of living reserves. So although they are general purpose funding, they are planned with a specific idea in mind, in this case, proposed cost of living increases, or they were donated or collected for a stated purpose. So a good example of this is we have large fleet replacement reserves. So that funding is collected to replace vehicles over a long period of time. For example, I think our ladder trucks in fire are like a 15-year replacement, and they're, I don't know now, but they're over $1 million for sure. So like we have to hold money for all of those things in long-term reserves. So we have large balances in a lot of these places. And then finally, we have utility reserves, some of which are dictated by policy, and some of which are held similarly in the capital funds for long-term replacement of infrastructure. So we do, that's a kind of summary of the 4 reserves that we have. So even though we do have $173 million in total, a much smaller percentage of that is kind of available for general purpose use. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation. Before I hand over to Kevin, I just want to run through the next steps. Later in this meeting, we have a public hearing, both on property tax and on this mid-buy update. And then November 21st, as required by the King County Assessor, we have to pass an ordinance for our preliminary property tax levy. And then, as I've mentioned a couple times, adoption of the CIP and amendments is on the December 12th meeting. So before I hand over to Kevin, are there any questions or comments on our mid-buy? Wow. All right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Good evening, Council, Madam Mayor. I have, again, I'm Kevin Pellstring, the Financial Planning Supervisor. I have the second study session update on the 23-28 Capital Improvement Program for you. So we're continuing our very exciting study session tonight. I have 10 slides, so please stop me if you have any questions specifically on projects. There's a couple points when I'm asking for council feedback, so I'll stop at those and pass it back to you. But again, if you have any comments or questions on any specific projects, feel free to stop me. I'm going to give a brief update on the real estate excise tax and discuss the reserve policy that we brought to you at the last study session on September 5th, and then move on to some project-by-project updates. So first is our summary by program. So this is just showing the changes to the funded CIP and unfunded CIP since the original adoption of the 23-28 CIP in December 2022. The big kind of number there that might draw your eye is the $12 million increase in the transportation funded 6-year funded CIP number since adoption. That's mainly made up of 4 different projects. One is a new roadway rehabilitation project on 120th Ave near Evergreen Hospital that we brought up in September 5th study session. Additionally, another $1.9 million from the new Juanita Drive scope that came out of the larger Juanita Drive project. $2 million from the 124th Ave Northeast project. That was additional need, and another $2.3 million that came from the 100th Ave Northeast additional need. So that's the bulk of what makes up that $12 million change. I'm fighting with this today. So as I promised, a brief update on real estate excise tax. As we discussed in the previous study session, we're monitoring this really closely, given the high interest rate environment and a lot of the uncertainty in the real estate market. Because a lot of this funding goes, or this entirely goes to our capital improvement program, it's a really important revenue that we need to keep track of and have a clear idea of where it's going to go next year. And it's been a major source for funding project needs over budget. So it's been one way that we've been able to continue to fund major projects affected by inflation. So through October, REIT receipts are roughly 76% of budget, which is $11 million each year. So definitely running behind budget. We're currently projecting that 2023 will end near $9.5 million and $10 million in 2024. So we'll be a combined $2.5 million under budget for the biennium is our expectation. But again, there's so much uncertainty, and a lot depends on actions by the Fed and how the local real estate market responds. So after the approved uses currently in the CIP update, the combined REIT reserves are projected to end 2024 at $5.5 million. So that is the total of the reserves. That's not above any of the policy reserves that we've been discussing. The REIT reserve policy. So as discussed at the September 5th study session, we got some of your feedback on some proposals. So because we are now trying to budget REIT closer to what we actually expect to receive, we want to make sure that we have adequate reserves to cover any dip in the market, which was immediately tested. So the current policy reserves $1 million in each REIT 1 and 2 for matching funds and also for any projects costs over the estimates and over the original budget. Based on your feedback, we're proposing the following blended approach, which would set up 2 different reserves within the REIT fund. The first is a REIT contingency fund, which is a lot like what we have now, but instead of being a flat $2 million total, it'll equal 15% of the past 5 years averaged annual total, so it'll be a running average. So currently that would put it at $2.2 million, so pretty close to what we have now. But it will also have a floor not to fall below $2 million unless instructed by City Council. The second is to establish a new matching fund reserves of $500,000 each in REIT 1 and 2. And as discussed, that is a really great opportunity for staff to be able to point to existing funding when going out for grant opportunities, and will give a lot of flexibility in our ability to find external funding without sinking a lot of money into projects that may not get off the ground without those grants. So staff recommends that we take this approach and that these new reserves be considered with the adoption of the 2025-2030 CIP, especially with the uncertainty in the REIT fund.
Okay, any discussion? I guess from me, do we have the money?
Well, we technically do. Part of the reason we're saying we should not actually implement this until the next budget cycle is to see what happens in 2024. But historically, we would be able to maintain these reserve levels based on what we have seen happen. So we feel good about the policy language, but we didn't feel ready to actually implement and set the money aside until we see what happens in 2024. So that's the reason we split
Councilmember
it.
Pascal.
Yeah, just to follow up on that. So when we look at it in the next update of the CIP, we'll be considering how to maybe phase that in potentially,
Correct.
because we might not want to get it
Yeah.
to those levels all at the same time if we're still facing revenue.
Well, that's a great point. That's the kind of thing we wanted to talk about options. Yeah, you
Yeah.
step into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yes, absolutely. All right.
But any concerns with the actual language itself? Again, we wouldn't implement it till okay.
Makes sense.
Great, thank you.
Great. Now moving into some updates by projects. So again, please stop me if you have any specific questions. But for transportation, a few different moves here. Some are just administrative. We are moving all of the Transportation Benefit District implementation debt proceeds. So this is the planned LTGO bond issuance in 2024. So moving all of those funds. Originally, they were budgeted over several years based on when we actually expected to spend them. We're moving all that to 24, so that all of that will be available to spend when we receive it, so that project managers will have the maximum flexibility to deliver those projects as quickly as possible, given our capacity. The second is that we're moving the Northeast 85th Street Station Area Transportation Implementation Plan, which was previously funded with $300,000 of general fund cash to the unfunded program. Because there's so much uncertainty in the expected development along the Northeast 85th Street corridor and finite project capacity, we're recommending that we delay this project until more is known about what direction that development will take. And then finally, we're moving $264,000 of REAT 2 funding from Transportation Benefit District project to the Juanita Drive multimodal. This is recognizing that they have overlapping scopes within both of those projects, and that this is the most efficient way to deliver. I think it's one pedestrian crossing that was identified as a high priority project within the Safer Routes to School action plan. So this is a way to make sure we're doing that as quickly as possible, along with another larger project. We're also recognizing $600,000.
Kevin, we have a question?
Kevin, just a sec.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you. A question about the Northeast 85th Street Station Area Implementation Plan. So in our CIP, we have, in attachment A, we have about 18 million funded in 2025 to implement various projects throughout the station area plan. And then in 2027, we have another 2.5 million. How does delaying the implementation plan affect those capital projects, or does it? And how is it related, I guess, to those?
Yeah, I think you're referring to the developer-funded projects.
Yeah, the
are you?
developer.
So this, I think, Brad, you might be able to help, but I think that the original thought for this funding was around projects that the city was actually going to be constructing. So I think this is mainly around, we don't want to go in and build infrastructure before that development is going to occur. We definitely flagged the developer projects and all of the station area plan projects in the CIP as something that we want to revisit with the 2025-2030 CIP with really holistic expectations and another year of development activity there. That'll give us a better idea of where is this going and when do we need to be prepared. So this isn't about just completely not doing that work, but it's about, okay, we need to make sure that we're putting our limited staff time towards that when we have those projects coming up. Do you have anything to add? Okay.
Okay, so the developer-funded projects are unrelated to, in the station area plan, are unrelated to this implementation plan.
They're related, but yeah, that planning is more around the city constructed projects.
It'd be good to understand that a little bit more because one would think that those developer-funded projects would also be impacted by the same issues that are impacting this implementation plan.
Definitely. We can follow up on that and give you a little bit more of a more comprehensive picture on that.
Is this more intended for the infrastructure fixes that we have planned for?
Yeah, so I think it's a great idea for us to bring back a more detailed explanation for the December meeting or even at the November 21st meeting. So my understanding was that these were about the coordinated ones. So this is what we would do when they were doing theirs. And since there's not a theirs yet, we were like, well, we should push this off until we know when that's coming. But what we should do is go through for the council, what were those projects and how were they related so you can see them.
Okay, thank you.
But it was about being done at the same time in a complementary fashion with the major investments by the developers.
Great.
Great.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay. So a couple of other smaller items. One, not so small, recognizing a $600,000 grant that we received for a project as part of the Transportation Benefit District implementation, which is on Northeast 124th Street over the 405 sidewalk. There's a couple of ped and bike improvement, crossing improvements, and RFBs that we got funding for. And we're transferring $22,000 to the Totem Lake Gateway for some final wetland credits, as well as $33,000 from the street fund 23-24 service package for some parking sensors and making sure that that funding is going to the annual striping program where those are being paid out of. All right, so couple updates on transportation projects, and I have Rod here in case any specific questions come up, but at the council discussion at the October 17th meeting on the the 124th Ave Northeast pedestrian improvement options, staff agreed that we'd come back with some funding options for the $270,000 interim improvements on the west side of 124th Ave Northeast in the event that the private developer doesn't do that first. So one update is that Rod told me before the meeting that 50% of the improvements on the west side of 124th Ave Northeast are actually have already been completed by the city. So so we do still need that funding, but a lot of that work has happened very quickly. Did you want to add anything? Yeah.
So it's the intersection at 124th and 100th, that northwest corner. So that segment, just kind of kitty corner with the fire station, that's complete right now.
Okay.
Great. So a couple of options here, and again, this is just in the event that the private developer doesn't complete that, which we should know sometime early next year. But staff does recommend that we use the current project balance and the 23 and 24 budget from the Vision Zero Safety Improvement Project. Another option is to use just REIT 1 to fund that in 24. I don't know if council has any specific comments on that.
Best approach.
Great.
Looks like you guys can go with your best decision.
Okay, sounds good. Noted. And then finally, one other note on transportation projects. We do have bid openings for the Juanita Drive and 124th Northeast improvements scheduled in November. So you'll see likely we'll see two large bids awarded at the December 12th meeting. So don't be surprised by that. As I heard from Rod that we have a lot of interest and a lot of bids for both of those projects, which is really exciting. All right. And, oh my goodness, sorry. I don't know what is happening. Okay. For the water, sewer, and surface water utilities, we're transferring some funding as a result of a fiscal note on October 3rd for the 5th and 8th water main replacement project. So this is just putting that into the CIP. And then also recognizing $500,000 of KCF FCD grant funding for the Goat Hill Drainage Ditch Conveyance and Channel Stabilization Project. And one project update. So again, this is not something that has already been put into the proposed CIP that you've seen in Attachment A, but something we wanted to provide a discussion on and get your feedback on. So staff is currently reviewing whether to use $2.2 million of the water sewer reserves to fund construction of a water main project on 122nd Avenue, which would be concurrent with two different surface water projects on 122nd Ave that are scheduled for funding in 23 and 24. It's currently an unfunded project, but it was previously prioritized and already designed back in 2018 and 2019. So the design is complete, but once we went to bid, decided to prioritize other schedules in that bid and put it back on the unfunded list. So this is a large project, and we wanted to bring it to you to get some comments on it. And the one thing I will say is that Rod and I were discussing it earlier, and he expects that we would save between 10 and 15% on actually implementing and construction by doing all these projects simultaneously. It would reduce extra nuisance to the surrounding public and residents, and the design is already complete, so we want to take advantage of that while that's still active. So we can provide a further update in the December adoption memo if that's determined that there is an urgent need, but that is definitely on the top of the list of currently unfunded water projects. So bring it to you, Madam Mayor or Council, if you have any questions or comments on that project in particular. We have Rod here to answer too.
I guess the only thing I would add to it is part of the reason we didn't say, like, hey, let's just do this is it is such a large amount, and it's a large chunk of what we have set aside in the reserve. So we're just trying to make sure that it makes sense to do it now. There's a lot of reasons why it's really better to do it now, but it is just a large cost. So.
And I would add that we currently have, we're projecting the ending 2024 balance of the water sewer reserves at about 5.8 million. But a lot of that is tied up or is connected to the west of market debt funding that was being considered when we did rate modeling and the South Reservoir project. So
That was the one question I had was about the Market Street project.
yeah, so based on the update that we provided in September 5th, we think that project will cost significantly less, but it will be helpful to kind of look at all of this together when we start the rate modeling process too.
Great. Councilmember Black.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just real quick, what is the source of revenue for replenishing the fund?
Utility rates, so water rates.
Okay. Which are currently forecasted above budget?
I think that they're expected right around budget, but the funding that actually goes from the water sewer operating fund to the capital fund is based on a depreciation schedule, which is just based on how many assets we have for both the water and sewer utilities. So that portion is kind of finite or already determined based on that rate model and the depreciation schedule.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
The utility tax was mentioned earlier is higher than projected, but the utility rate revenue is not.
Gotcha.
In the utility funds, most of the variability is on the expenditure side. The rates are pretty close to budget most of the time.
Closer to the mic there, George.
So in the utility funds, the variability tends to be on the expenditure side. So the utility rates themselves are pretty close to budget. As the city manager said, the utility taxes are above budget, mostly because of the private utilities, which are the electric and gas. But we've had significant cost savings over time in water projects. Not sure if it's so true anymore, but that's where we get a lot of the variability in those funds from, is on the expenditures.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Kevin.
All right. Moving on to the last couple of slides. For facilities, we've transferred, so as a result of the September 5th fiscal note, we're just reflecting that this is the purchase of the 6th Street property acquisition via an interfund loan from the Surface Water Operating Fund for the Fisk Family Park. We're swapping $3.8 million of parks impact fees and $500,000 of REIT 1 with general fund cash in the Houghton Park and Ride acquisition project that was in the October 17th fiscal note. Alongside the purchase authorization memo. So that means there's no net funding change in those. And just a note on that, that funding, obviously for parks, impact fees, and REIT 1 are both tied to the eventual use of that property. So we'll definitely continue to take a look at that once we've determined its final use. Adding $82,000 of REIT 1 to fund the Kirkland Performance Center HVAC system. out of the allotment already set aside for the KPC rigging system, I believe it is. Sorry, I forgot the name of that project. It's a large project that we're contributing some funding for. And then finally, we're adding $395,000 for the City Hall space densification project to cover the cost of installation and materials and upgrades for the IT, parks and community services, and some shared spaces in City Hall. So that's an ongoing project to make use of our existing space within City Hall and make sure that we have space for our growing staff. So as George mentioned, next steps, we have the final adoption of the 2023-28 CIP update, along with the mid-biennial budget adjustments on December 12th. So we can definitely take back any feedback, and we'll bring back any final changes, especially related to those large bids that will be awarded. Any other questions or comments?
Councilmember Pascal?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, just a couple questions, probably one for Rod, and Kevin, probably one for you. On the grant funding that was received for the 124th Avenue sidewalks across 405 of 600,000. My understanding is that's for design, not for construction of those. That's correct?
I do believe that is actually for the construction and implementation of that project as well, but I'll double check that.
Okay. I think in the transportation ad hoc, that was one of the questions about whether that was design money.
Just the
or
grant money for that design?
yeah.
Or the whole project?
if the grant money was just for the design.
Oh, yeah, I'll double check on that. That could be, the grant allocated just to the design could be. The whole project, though, is for the implementation.
And I think what I understood from that was that that was funded through some federal grant program, and that typically those projects that are funded for design then will be good candidates then to get grant funding for construction, to come back for
Yeah,
construction dollars.
that's typically true, yeah.
And so the question is are we accounting for that in our CIP budget, or how do we account for that? And that would free up money then from the Safe Routes to School or the TBD funding then to reallocate for other projects, correct? At some point.
I suppose that could be true, yeah.
So your point is we should assess that to say, hey, if we're going to maybe qualify for some additional dollars, how could we reallocate what's already there to the local match?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can-
And when would that be done, and how, is it after we construct all of them, see if there's leftover money, and then assess? That's just something to think
Sure.
about.
We'll
because
talk
it
about
could
that. We can bring
it
that
could
back.
free up
Yeah.
money
Bring
down
that
the
back too.
road.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, isn't it kind of a constant churn in terms of grants coming in, qualifying late, getting it through the capital
Right.
Yeah, but it's
process?
TBD, that's specific kind of money that we're allocating towards
Right,
specific
right.
projects, so, yeah. And for specific types of projects,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And we can bring that back.
That was just a question. And then the second one was about, so naturally I compared the attachment A, detailed list of funded projects that was in the packet compared to the one when we last saw it back in actually December last year. And the one project that I saw that was funded that we didn't talk about, and I wanted to understand what it was 120th Avenue preservation. That wasn't on the funded list in December. Now it's on the funded list now. And so I was wondering if you could talk about what that project is.
Yeah, that's Totem Lake from 128th to 132nd, rehabilitating, or prior to rehabilitating the road, it's the preservation of the roadway there.
That's in front of the hospital there.
Yeah.
Okay. Great, thank you.
I was just going to add that we did include that in the September 5th study session, so there's a brief blurb in that memo that might give you a little bit more information too.
I missed that then, thank you.
It's all good. All right.
Hey, you done?
I'm done. Thank you very much.
Good job. Thank you for the update, and we'll have the hearing in just a little bit, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So back to you, City Manager. You want to talk about the letter?
All right, so since we do have a little bit of time, although we can't take action in the study session, I wanted to talk with the council about the potential letter to the SCA PIC that's also meeting at the same time. I sent you a version earlier this morning, and then I just sent an updated version about an hour ago. So Diana Hart has been checking in with our two King County Council reps, Claudia Balducci and Rod Dabowski, about this. Turns out since we learned about it and sent the letter yesterday, they actually acted last night. So the King County Council has actually passed the full resolution. And so the original letter said, hey, hold off until we can talk to you. So I don't have a slide for this, but I did forward you all an email with an updated letter. And so what we did in the updated letter is we just modified it to say, I'll actually read it to you. We learned today that the King County Council passed the resolution on Tuesday, November 7th. We believe that PIC and the SCA Board should consider requesting that the county executive defer any response to the resolution until there can be a more focused conversation with the Sound Cities Association about the levy. So basically addressing it to the executive, since that's now where it is. A couple things I want to say about the letter, and then I'll open up for questions or comments. The intent here is not to say we're opposed to a climate change levy or for it either, right? It's basically to say, as a city, we're learning about this now. It's something that King County Council is proposing. It suggests in the resolution to have $1 billion over a 6 to 8 year period funded by property tax for climate. And as we highlight in the letter, there's a lot to talk about with that. So including the fact that, many residents throughout the county are feeling burdened by taxes. The second issue that's highlighted in the letter is that the state has made it known that they have about $1 billion worth of money generated by their own Climate Act, and that would be invested similarly to the ideas in this local initiative. And then finally, we highlight that something else to consider that could also be extremely beneficial for climate, but also could help address some of the previous issues we've been working on, is to consider a housing levy, an affordable housing levy, as kind of a win-win that would both advance the ball on climate, but also address some of the issues that many of you worked on this past year with the affordable housing subgroup and the GMPC. So, and the letter concludes by simply saying, once again, we should ask the executive if they'll partner with SCA as we assess all these things, rather than just simply send a response to the King County Council with a proposed levy. So, so that's the intent of the levy. It's to be focusing on partnerships, looking at options, not making any decisions, but just highlighting that this is a big deal and it probably needs further discussion, and asking if the SCA would agree to do something like that with us. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Or comments? I think we're basically in agreement. Deputy Mayor Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the work by staff and the scrambles. We're learning about this and trying to respond. Given that the full county council has acted, I do think that we're bringing up important points, but I think the tone of the letter could change to be saying, instead of slow down because it's clear that this is moving forward, more of saying how to make this package better as the executive builds it. You've got good points here in saying there needs to be housing in the levy, and to try to refocus a climate proposal to have a significant housing element, I think is right on that we need to do. But I would actually change some things, like in the second paragraph, not going as far as deferring any final action, but putting this more as a feedback on what should be in the levy. And having more conversations with SCA about that. Also, the 4th paragraph talking about the Climate Commitment Act. I think the points are well said, that there is money there. And I like the point about being complementary rather than redundant, but I don't think necessarily our message should be wait. That's in the last sentence there. So I guess those are some tone changes that I'd want to consider, given what we're just learning right now. Thank you.
So as an example, to say, rather than defer response, say the county executive include the Sound Cities in any development of the levy, something like that.
That would work for me. I do think they should wait. I think every single opportunity we get, we are asking for more tax money from our, and we experienced it last night. I mean, there is a resistance to all of this. And the fact of the matter is, there's already that $1 billion sitting out there. So I would like to encourage the county to be creative in working with the state and with SCA around how we can access those dollars in a way that has a climate impact because it's housing, local housing. I don't know if there's a way to do both those things, but. Any other discussion? Councilmember Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I do agree with you in that our community very clearly said last night, let's don't increase property taxes. And I understand that Councilmember Dembowski has been working on this for a couple of years, but unfortunately, it just came to my attention last week when we received the PIC packet. I heard the deputy mayor talk about let's incorporate housing in this package. And we do understand that responding to climate change and reducing single occupancy vehicles is a housing issue. But that seems complicated to do it this way. So I'm with the mayor, and it is wait. Let's have a bigger conversation about what our objectives are, not only as a region, but as a state. And again, this Climate Commitment Act money is available, and we don't have a plan for how it's going to be used. So I do think it's worthwhile to just say, let's have a larger conversation about this before we move forward. So that's where I am.
Anybody else?
So the concept here would be to make some amendments and bring this back for action at the very beginning of the council meeting at 7:30. And that way it could be given to the PIC while they're meeting. So one of the things I could do is take a shot at incorporating some proposed changes and bring them back in track changes form so the council can look at it at 7:30 and then make it. One possible way to thread the needle of the comments would be maybe some such as, like an option such as a housing levy or an option such as including housing and a climate levy. I mean, that might be a way to articulate some different options without picking one, if the council would feel that would be helpful.
Oh, Councilmember Curtis.
I love how you threaded that needle there.
Yeah.
That was good. So does PIC know that, does David Hoffman and Brian know this letter's coming?
You actually don't know the answer to that question.
I
don't know
do.
if Diana's watching.
I do.
We did.
David Hoffman does know.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I think it would be good if we're going to make an effort to get it to them tonight, that they know it's coming. So
At the North End Mayor's meeting yesterday, I brought up the subject and indicated that we would be having some kind of a communication coming.
hot off the presses. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
But I think with some modest changes, I can incorporate your thoughts, and I can show them to you at 7:30 and see if that works for the council.
Excellent. With that, I think
Great.
we get to break early, and we will see
Dinner.
you all at 7:30.
Great, thank you. I will go type.
Thank you very much. We are back in session following a study session for updates on the 2023-2024 mid-biennial budget and the 2023-2028 capital improvement program. Before we start with our regular meeting, we are going to take a brief couple of moments to consider a letter that has to go out within the next half hour. City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So a couple of quick updates on this. So the first is that so Diana Hart, our Government Affairs Manager, is going to put up the letter with the draft edits. She was attending the PIC. The PIC actually did not have a quorum, so they are concluding their business for today, but we did tell them that such a letter was being considered and might come. We also have an SCA board meeting, I believe, is on November 15th, but the SCA PIC is actually adjourned for the night. So just want to make sure you know that before we take this up. So what we have here, I sent you all this letter, but Diana and Carmen put it on nice letterhead, so this will be the official version. And I had it in track changes. I deleted the yellow highlight that I had before. So a couple things you can see in my track changes. First is we saw that's actually a motion. King County does a motion on a resolution, so I changed that. We also found out that the council did amend the motion to soften a little bit by saying if a levy is proposed. So throughout some of it, they said if proposed, it should, if proposed. So I want to make sure we highlighted that. So then as the discussion happened to the council, I'm suggesting the language that we believe the board and PIC should consider requesting that as the King County executive is evaluating any response to this motion, the executive include a more focused conversation with the Sound Cities about the levy. You can then see going down, the other change I propose is any regional initiative, instead of saying should wait, any regional initiative should acknowledge the state funds and strive to be complementary rather than redundant. That's my proposed language. And then again, down below that, you can see proposed saying options such as including affordable housing in the climate levy or proposing a dedicated affordable housing levy could be a true win-win. So acknowledging it could be either way. And then because of that, if it was blended, I proposed changing the language from 1 billion to hundreds of millions, assuming there'd be some sort of split. And then finally, prioritizing affordable housing in a countywide levy would also be a dramatic investment in reducing emissions. So again, trying to say not exactly how would you do it, but noting it. And then at the very end, asking the executive department in developing a response to the motion and finding a path forward together. So. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions or get comments or potential amendments. Diana's able to amend it on the fly if you have.
Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, thank you for making these edits, City Manager. I think you did a good job of threading that needle. Just a couple of comments. My first is a very minor point is in our Dear SCA PIC committee. PIC, the C is committee, so I would just say Dear SCA PIC. Okay. To avoid that redundancy. And then the other is I think we should be as specific as we can as to what our ask is of SCA, the PIC, and or the board. In our last sentence, we ask for the SCA PIC and SCA board to ask King County Executive. We could potentially propose, to write a letter, for SCA to write a letter or something of that nature. I anticipate that we're going to be asked specifically what we want them to do. Okay. So I think either leaving the sentence as is and then saying such as, adding a such as a letter, or being very specific that we are in our ask to send a letter or something of that nature. I'm leaving that to, if council's okay with that, for you to wordsmith. But.
Deputy Mayor Arnold?
Is everyone okay with that concept? I think it makes sense. Further suggestions or edits?
Just wanted to let the whole body know I was able to have a conversation with Councilmember Dembowski during our break. I know he reached out to several council members, and he emphasized a couple of points. One was communicated in the city manager's summary of the motion language that the motion really talks about kicking off this process, having a stakeholder process, wanting to get input on what this is. And Councilmember Dembowski really emphasized this is the beginning of the process and sounded genuinely open to feedback on how to make this work. Given what the conversation I had with him and what we have in this letter right here, I think we are hitting the right message of saying, we really believe housing is important, both because of our agenda and its impact on climate. And we are sensitive to what we're hearing from voters and want to have that conversation. So I am in support of sending the letter we see before us. I would, given that we don't know when SCA would act, I would ask that we copy the SCA board on this because it may not go through, action at this point may not go through PIC. It may happen directly by the board. Thank you.
And can I just make one additional suggestion, and just bouncing off of Councilmember Falcone's? I think it should read, Dear SCA Public Issues Committee. You can put pick and parentheses and do whatever.
I apologize. I did write it quickly, so I.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam
Fair
Mayor,
point.
for allowing me to speak again as we're thinking through this on the fly. Given what Deputy Mayor said, and also given that in our last sentence, we're asking something of both SCA PIC and the SCA board, I would propose that we actually write it to PIC and the board, Dear SCA Public Issues Committee and Board. Thank you.
You're anticipating that, I see.
Diana's at the keys here.
Got it.
She's awesome. She's fast.
Okay, are we good with this?
I apologize. One other point, Councilmember Dembowski did say he would be happy to come before us at a future council meeting to talk about this in more detail.
Great. Can I get a motion then? Councilmember Falcone.
I move that we approve this letter as appears on the screen. Is that good enough?
It's been moved by Councilmember Falcone, seconded by Councilmember Curtis to approve the letter we have just been presented as corrected or as
correct.
amended.
And we'll make that final change at the very end as well.
Great. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And this takes us now to our communications agenda and items from the audience. This is the time in our meeting when we normally hear from the public on matters that are not quasi-judicial or scheduled for a public hearing. We do have a public hearing this evening. It is item 6A, proposed 2023-2024 mid-biennial budget and property tax levy increase. On other issues, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and the council will receive up to 3 comments each on both sides of each issue. If you are present either in person or virtually and would like to address the council during this items from the audience period, please sign up using the online public comment instruction link or in person using the posted QR code. For those who are participating by phone, please dial *9 to be recognized to speak. Community members will be called in the order in which they signed up. Items from the audience is an important part of our business meeting, and we ask that everyone be treated with kindness and respect. We ask that you please not clap or applaud after a speaker or express your disagreement with a speaker. We want everyone in Kirkland to feel welcome expressing their viewpoints, regardless of content. Because they can be disruptive, signs and placards are not allowed in council chambers during our meetings, regardless of their content. With that, City Clerk.
We have 3 people signed up to speak this evening. The first speaker is Rachel Freund, followed by Alex Zimmerman and Susan Davis.
And is Ms. Freund remote or here? Oh, there you are. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Rachel Freund. I live on the border of Totem Lake and Juanita. I'm a physician and a mother. I'm here to advocate for the preservation of the wetland at the corner of 116th Way Northeast and Northeast 128th Street in Totem Lake, just across 405 from Evergreen Hospital. I appreciate the hard work you do trying to balance the development of our area with the needs of the residents. I'm sure it's a difficult job. My family has benefited from the amenities at the new Totem Lake Village shopping area, the new parks, and the new pedestrian bridge. We've also suffered from development. We live in a typical residential neighborhood and our backyard is fully fenced, but I can't let my toddler play in it anymore without close supervision because we frequently have bobcats and deer with sharp antlers in our yard now, which have been displaced from their habitat by construction of the new senior apartment complex. It's very stressful to feel like my kids aren't even safe in their own fenced backyard. Also, the workers building the new high-voltage power lines have cut down 3 mature deciduous trees that used to shade our yard and house. When the heat of summer comes, my kids won't be able to play in the backyard during much of the day, and we're probably going to have to get another portable air conditioner to cool our house, which will then use more electricity. And I don't know what we'll do during the smoke season when we can't even use the AC. A mature tree can provide enough oxygen and remove enough carbon dioxide in a year to support a family of 4. There were at least 30 mature trees cut down to build the power lines, some needlessly, and even more have been cut down for the 2 freeway interchange projects. I have lived in Washington my entire life. It wasn't until a few years ago that we started having a smoke season every summer, and never until this year have I seen the cedar trees turning brown and dying. We must take heed and prepare our community for the climate change onslaught that is accelerating. Which brings me to the proposal to drain the wetland at 116th and 128th and turn it into a 7-story apartment building. Even though it's not a very large wetland, it is significant. Wetlands are extremely valuable. They filter our air, our water, help prevent flooding, and help buffer the kinds of extreme weather that we are seeing more and more frequently. Not to mention the mental health benefits of having a green space right in the middle of what is becoming a concrete and metal landscape. I don't want to see us lose another valuable resource of trees and plants in this wetland. I understand that the proposed apartment building is to provide affordable housing for seniors, which is a noble goal. But I hope that another site can be found. Perhaps with everyone working from home now, since office buildings are going empty, one might become available at a cheaper price. Or perhaps another option is the Totem Lake Hotel property that has been vacant for so long. On behalf of our environment and our health and safety, I ask you to consider well and take what steps you can to preserve one of our valuable natural resources, the wetland at 116th Way Northeast and Northeast 128th Street in Totem Lake. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Freund.
The next speaker is Alex Zimmerman, followed by Susan Davis.
Welcome, Mr. Zimmerman.
Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil, my dirty damn Nazi fascist and anti-Semite. My name is Alex Zimmerman. I live in Bellevue for more than 35 years. Yesterday, 20% vote for me. 20% vote for me and for Trump. It's a huge percentage. It's okay. 20% surprised me. I think maybe a little bit more or less, but this surprised me. But who's this 80% who vote for my opposition Democrat? It's approximately 12,000 people. So these 12,000 people, is this not exactly about Bellevue? It's a problem what is we have right now in King Country in Seattle, you know what is in this Democratic Foundation. Approximately 8%, this approximately same percentage, what is German Nazi in Soviet Commie, a member of party. We don't have registration of Democrat, but German Nazi and Commie have registration. So this approximately same percentage. What does this mean? It means we have a mafia, a Nazi organization who control us for many years. Guys, for this I told you, Seattle is King Country #1 fascist city in America. It's my slogan, what as I spoke before, stop Seattle fascism with idiotic face. But Seattle have totally different reaction right now. I think this will be beginning, you know what it means, stopping democratic mafia, because they re-elect all Amos consul. You understand what it means? It's never happened to me. I have 12 elections before, and many in Seattle, you know what it means. Yeah, absolutely. So situation very interesting for me, because I thinking it's a beginning of end of democratic mafia. Maybe not my lifetime, you know what it means, but the slow by slow we come back to normal America, what is all America. Because King Country is very unique situation. Nobody in America, no one country in America, 85% vote for Democrat. You know what is I mean? The same percentage, and I told you before, vote for Adolf Hitler in Soviet Union Commie, you know what it means. But this 8% is a foundation who control us. Guys, what does this mean? This means another thousand and thousand people, they scared moving, you know what it means? It's not because they lazy, no, they scared. Because when you have a fascism or communism, you know what it means? You don't want to step up in doing something. You cannot stand up because you're scared. It's normal reaction, human beings reaction. But begin and start right now. In Seattle election show right now, Democratic mafia can be stopped.
Thank you, Mr.
Stand up,
Zimmerman. Your
America.
time is up.
Yes, thank you very much.
And my apologies on behalf of the council for if anybody was upset by Mr. Zimmerman's comments.
The next speaker is Susan Davis, who is virtual.
Hello, Council. Thank you for serving our community, and I apologize that you're sometimes the public council. Public comment is not great. I am actually one of the persons that loves that we put things on the ballot and that we are able to, as a community, vote on important matters. For example, the Prop 1, as you guys know, 38% pass, 62% say no, it's going to fail. I was supportive of the no side of Prop 1. I really feel like the city council did not listen to the voters, the community. And of course, in 2015, it failed miserably. It was a metropolitan park district. It only got about 35% of the vote. This new round in 2023, it was just as bad. You guys didn't listen to the community. The exploratory committee was very limited on the questions they could ask and everything. It was very controlling. I feel like the city wasted a lot of tax dollars, created a lot of stress for people, a lot of fixed income people, a lot of low income people that are a paycheck, two paychecks away from paying their mortgage or losing their job or whatever. I feel like the city, hopefully you guys have learned from this. And I think that a successful community relies on a two-way dialogue between residents and the city council. And you guys do not need to just listen to your special interest groups or your close friends. I feel like we need to have more of a collaborative environment with the residents. Your guys' surveys you did not listen to, the 2021 survey about what would you want in an aquatics facility. A lot of people do not have these items that you guys added to this huge aquatics facility. They also wanted a bond. And I understand this is a very expensive facility. It's not going to break even. Well, guess what? That's why a lot of cities are not building these facilities, because they make no sense. The city and city council's unwillingness to partner with the YMCA because they think they could do things best themselves. I don't think so. I was part of the Bellevue Y and, of course, North Shore. I also went to the Newport YMCA in Sammamish. We wouldn't go there on Sundays because the Sammamish YMCA, I don't know if it still is because we're no longer members of the YMCA. We go to LA Fitness. It's like $30 a month, but it was free for Sammamish residents from like 10 a.m. to 4 on Sundays, which is great, right? So that was one of the win-wins for the community. I feel like the city council, if you look at the yes proposition disclosure, it's the whole payroll of the executives and city council. You guys were pushing this so hard. You have left such a bad taste in taxpayers' and citizens' mouth. It's ridiculous. Yes, it seems like the incumbents are probably going to win their re-elections, which is great. I believe that voting is the powerful tool we have, but it's also monitoring and making sure that you guys are doing what you need to do for us. So use those REAP funds that you guys have, use them for sidewalks. You've been squirreling them away to try to utilize these reserves to build this pool, but you were going to build it via a different mechanism, right? Because
Thank you,
you're
Ms.
just gonna
Davis. I'm
basically
sorry,
take
your
the
time
money
is up.
from this
Ms. Davis,
levy lift and pay for the bond.
please
And
feel free to communicate further with us via email. Thank you.
We have no other speakers signed up.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the council? Seeing none, I'm going to declare this items from the audience period closed, which takes us to item number 6, our public hearing. This is the 2023-24 mid-biennial budget and property tax levy increase. This is a public hearing to receive public comments on the 2023-24 mid-biennial budget and property tax increase. I will now open the public hearing. City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So to provide a little context for the public hearing, we have a brief presentation about the mid-biennial budget and the property tax levy increase, and that will be made by our financial planning manager, George Dugdale.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening again, Mayor and council members. Let me just pull up share the screen here. Okay. There we go. Okay, so as we said, this is a brief presentation to introduce the public hearing on the mid-buy CIP and property tax for 2024. So we have a financial update very briefly, which will touch on some of the same things as the presentation in the study session, a list of service packages, as well as the capital improvement program changes, both of which, again, were mentioned in the study session earlier this evening. As background, we are required to do a mid-buy update to our biennial budget per RCW, which needs to happen between September and December of the first year. The modifications will be made by the council via ordinance in December. We are also required to do a revenue public hearing every year, even though we have a 2-year budget. And this revenue hearing must include consideration of any property tax increases, as you can see at the bottom of this slide. So the next two slides are very similar to slides that were in the presentation earlier and are also in the memo from Council. Sales taxes are anticipated to be at budget in 23 and ahead of budget in the second year of the biennium. Property taxes, as I want to highlight these as they're a key part of the public hearing, they're assumed to be at budget, which includes our optional 1% increase in 24, as well as an assumption of 1.5% of new construction, which is allowable under state law. And we also have increases in investment interest and utility taxes, and our business taxes, as discussed earlier, are below budget, but are closer to budget than they were when we did our council retreat in May. On the expenditure side in the general fund, we are currently over budget due to personnel expenditure estimates, which are higher than originally anticipated, and because non-personnel costs are very close to budget, reflecting high inflation and cost increases as staff have been working to complete priorities, and we also have fewer vacancies. The third bullet point there is key. As we have a 2-year appropriation, immediate action is not required. However, we will be bringing forward action in 2024 to ensure that the city doesn't finish the biennial period above budget on the expenditure side. This is a new slide that wasn't here earlier. So this is the revenue changes that were considered as part of the budget when it was adopted in late 2022. So there's no new revenues proposed as part of this mid-buy. The planned increases include a 1% increase, the optional 1% increase to property tax, the new vehicle license fee, which is the $20 car tab, which goes into effect on January 1st. And the table there at the bottom shows the utility rate increases as adopted in October 2022. So finally, getting towards the end, this is a list of the city manager recommended service packages, which are recommended as part of this mid-biennial update. The funding sources is about $1 million of service packages, almost all of which is one time. The funding sources are primarily investment interest above budget, the fire service packages, which are the 3 in the middle there, funded via Fire Proposition 1 funds. And then there are some other smaller ones funded via a new grant in the court and some fund balance in the fleet fund. The capital improvement program changes, so there's about $2.5 million of those, which includes $300,000 of, which is offset by $300,000 of one project being moved to the unfunded list. The description there is provided. Those were all discussed earlier. There is some grant awards as well as some timing changes to projects. So following this public hearing, we will now have which covers both the property tax and the mid-buy. We will have a regular meeting to adopt the property tax levy in November, the second meeting of November. In prior years, we've had the property tax adoption and the public hearing on the same meeting, but in order for comments to be incorporated into future into the council's decision on property tax, we have split the two. So we have the public hearing tonight. The November 21st meeting would include the preliminary property tax levy, and then on December 12th, final adoption of the mid-buy, the property tax, and the 23-28 CIP update. And those are my slides, so now open for back to the council for public comment.
Thank you. Any questions for George? With no questions, I will now call upon any members of the public who have signed up to address the council. Nobody online? Is there anybody who wishes to address the council?
Susan Davis has just raised her hand virtually.
Are we bringing her on? And let's have 3 minutes. Welcome back, Ms. Davis.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
We are.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to mention about the budget. I reviewed the file. It looks like potentially you guys have a smaller now budget for the area of, I'm sorry. Let's see. So Prop 1 did not pass. And so I don't think we need to spend the dollars that you guys had mentioned for an extension of a one-time communication outreach specialist and the one-time management analyst for the parks. I think it sounds like that's off because you guys did not have them on that one slide that the gentleman just showed. My other issue is just our budget. It's increased 78% since 2015, 2016, while other cities, it's even in your guys' packet, Bellevue has only increased 57% and Redmond 68%. What are we doing with our money? We have people that are wanting these capital projects completed, get us sidewalks, bike lanes. We have REIT, we have a big REIT reserve. And you guys even mentioned that this REIT reserve is reserved for capital projects. Yes, you're probably reserving it for the capital project of the aquatic center, which is not going to pass. Let's get that money going. You guys have 90 million of these budgeted reserves that you could use for these purposes. We don't need you buying any more property. I don't even know what you guys are going to do with the Houghton Park and Ride. You know, you've basically also bought the PCC parcel, but of course it's more of a loan. It's not a capital project. I don't even know all of the mumbo jumbo with how you guys got that 14 million for it, but that's fine. But rather than earmarking funds for an aquatic center, like you've done, let's address the unfunded projects in our transportation plan. We have stoplights that need to be done. We have sidewalks that need to be done. It's more than just the $20 car tabs for the walk to school areas. There's sidewalks everywhere that need to be done. We can use these resources to acquire the land for the Finn Hill Green Loop that was on the ballot, that was a small little part, which was because it was mostly the aquatic center, that should be purchased. We could get some 3-court pickleball facilities. We could buy bike racks for every park so people could ride their bikes to parks and not worry about it. And no, we do not have bikes. We do not have bike racks at parks, and we should. It's ridiculous. Also, why don't we lastly dedicate funds to support a seasonal park ranger, right? It didn't get on the ballot. You guys have funds. Let's get a seasonal park ranger added as well. That was on the ballot. It's not passing. Let's get it so they can enhance the safety and maintenance of our parks. I think that all of this could easily be done, and I don't understand
Thank
the
you, Ms. Davis.
justification.
I'm sorry, your time is up.
Okay, thanks.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the council with regard to this topic?
Yes, Eileen Forster is virtual and she would like to address the council.
Ms. Forster, are you there?
There, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I'm hoping to advocate for holding off on Stores to Shores until we could get the sidewalk issues along 124th Avenue Northeast worked out. I know that the city's worked hard on it. My feeling is that there's too much disjointed information. And if you're a person actually trying to traverse with a wheelchair, we're not there yet. And I think it would be best to take a little more time with it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback. Anybody else? Okay. Then I'm going to close this public comment portion of the hearing. Council will now consider all public comments received on this issue, including those submitted in writing. And we are having no council action this evening.
That's correct.
Takes us to item number 7, State of the College Address by Dr. Eric Murray. Welcome, Dr. Murray.
Excellent. Thank you. I like it when someone else works my technology for me. That's helpful. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Eric Murray. I'm the president of Cascadia College, and this is my annual visit to talk to you about the state of the college. By way of introduction, Cascadia College serves the city of Kirkland. We are defined by our school districts that we serve. So we serve Lake Washington, North Shore, and Riverview School District. And every year around this time, I go to all of the city councils and the school district boards to give a state of the college address. When I was here last year, I was reminiscing that it was a little earlier because I came over when it was sunny and warm outside and not so much today. And so I have good news to report today, and I'm happy to talk to you about where we are. So I think do I get to advance these or someone else? Now I need help. Oh, well, okay. We'll start there. 4 things to talk about today: student success, equity and inclusion, access, and growth with the college. So first, with student success, Cascadia every year seems to surpass other community colleges in the effect that we have on our students. We have the highest percentage of transfer students into the university system out of the community colleges. We show by our state data that Cascadia students generally earn about 9% higher in wages upon graduation. And if they're in the business area, it's 16,000 more, and in IT, about 11,000 more. So those are great stats for our graduates. But we also use other metrics to determine student success. We have the highest number of transfer pathways into UW-Bothell. We were designed that way as a co-located campus. We've seen increases in student retention, and actually the bottom point there, we have the highest retention rate in the community college system. Nationally, students stay from one fall to the next fall. About 49% of students are retained. At Cascadia in this last year, it was 93% of students. It's huge. And that's because, I think post-pandemic, students are trying to find their way back into higher education. So this was a higher than normal year for us in terms of our retention. And we have the highest percentage of students who enter in at below college level math and English. We have the highest percentage of getting them into college level during their first year with us. We are finding that more students are coming to us this year with a learning gap. We think that's because of the pandemic, and that students, because of the online learning environment, maybe aren't or weren't as prepared upon graduation as previous classes. We also pride ourselves on our success in equity and inclusion. We have a couple of signature programs. One's called Cascadia Scholars, which we started 3 years ago with 16 students. This is for historically underrepresented and marginalized students. We offer them mentors who help guide them through their path at Cascadia. We started with 16, it grew to 53, and now we have over 100 students in the program. And those students are showing even higher retention rates than students who are not in the mentor program. We have an Equity and Inclusion Foundations course that we developed. All of our employees are asked to take it. It has become popular, and so our state board for community and technical colleges would like to send people to it. We've had Leadership East Side. We are working with them to help influence their curriculum with regard to equity and inclusion. And the King County Library System just asked if they could send their employees to our Foundations of E&I course. So we're trying to do things not only for our students, but for our employees. Last year, we had 3 student of color conferences representing the 3 school districts. Over 600 students of color landed at Cascadia's campus for those conferences. And then we had a high number of them end up applying to both Cascadia and UW-Bothell because of that experience. And then we are also dedicated doubled our staffing in this area. So we think that's a success for us. Access is another mode of success, and we have fully implemented now something called Guided Pathways, which is a state and national curriculum, or I guess advising program you can call it, that helps students decide on a meta major instead of a specific major. So they take general education requirements within this broad group. There are 7 meta majors, and then when they get to university, they are prepared then to choose which major they want, and they're prepared for any one of them. That gives them extra time to decide on the specific major before they get into it and still meet their general education requirements. The city of Kenmore gave us a grant because of this learning gap issue that we talked about. We received it this summer to start a Tutorial Tuesday program for 12th graders and recent graduates. They come to campus, and in our learning center, they get remedial tutoring on both math and English courses, so we can get them back up to speed and into a higher level math and English course. We hope that other folks will want to see the value in that kind of program and support that for the future. That affects Inglemoor High School right now. And then you might be aware of the Redmond Together Center, this effort where there are more than 20 nonprofits and 3 blocks of affordable housing. We have a classroom in that center, and we opened this fall with 9 classes. A lot of them are full, and we will be expanding to 15 classes next quarter. One cool thing about the Together Center, their principle is you bring people together and you can serve people better. And we had this conversation with one of the tenants there, a nonprofit that supports folks of Chinese descent, and they offer English as a second language level 1. We offer level 1 through 6, so they're going to send their students to us after level 1, and then we'll take them on to level 2, 3, 4, and 5, right there in the same location. So that kind of partnership is really helping folks in that community, and we're glad now to have that significant presence there. Then lastly, I want to talk about growth, and these are capital growth projects. Next Thursday, we have the grand opening for Innovation Hall, which is our $80 million STEM building that we built in conjunction with UW-Bothell. And this building, which will open January 2nd, will have faculty offices next door to each other, both our students and UW-Bothell students in the same building, state-of-the-art science labs for them. And the premise here is that we're taking advantage and leveraging this co-location so that our students do have the opportunity, the Cascadia students, to be mentored by UW-Bothell students and to see UW-Bothell classes and to interact in a commingled facility. And it's the first intentional building built for both a community college and a university in the state and I think the nation. So that's good. With regard to growth, when I was here last time, we were worried about enrollment, significantly worried about enrollment, and to the point that we were using reserves and stimulus funds to stay afloat. And I am very happy to say that enrollment took a rise last spring such that we did not have to use our reserves. We are up another 11% this fall and are financially back to stable ground, and students are returning. Students also are wanting in-person classes. Our in-person classes fill 4 times quicker than our online classes because students, at least at the community college level, really embrace the idea of being in a classroom with their instructor and learning in a hands-on fashion rather than online. So we have now about a 70-30 split between in-person and online, and we're going to stick that way. A lot of folks predicted that in-person learning would go away because of the pandemic and our adaptation. It didn't. It is back very strong. So in summary, the college is doing great. Financially, we're stable. Enrollment's going up. We're expanding in buildings and locations. Our programs that we're offering to students to help them succeed are in full force, and I'm a lot more calm this year than I was last year. So happy to take questions if time allows.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. I just wanted to remind you that people said handshakes and hugs were going to go away too. There we are.
Yeah.
So any questions or comments for Dr. Murray? Well done. Good news to hear. And when I was there for the mayor's conference, I was really impressed.
You saw the building right there, yeah.
Well, not just the building, it's alive with kids. It's just, it really is amazing. With so many folks living on campus now too.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Eric. Bye-bye. Okay, this takes us to item number 9, our consent calendar. Before we have a motion, I'd like to ask Deputy Mayor Arnold for an audit of the accounts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We had payroll in the amount of $5,978,564.27, and bills in the amount of $11,177,991.69. I'll note that the bills included invoices for several large capital projects and the Fisk property purchase.
Thank you for that. Okay, can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar? It's been moved by Councilmember Falcone.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Curtis to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor, please so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Takes us to our business agenda. First item on our business agenda is, wait a minute,
The 2023 Annual Comprehensive
There you
Plan and
go.
Zoning Code Amendments.
City Manager.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I had to turn the page on that one. So here to give you that presentation is our Senior Planner, Scott Guter, and I believe our Deputy Planning Director, Allison Zeich, is also here.
Great.
And I think we might have a slight delay in Scott logging on, so I can go ahead and get the deck pulled up and start while he gets logged on here. So give us just a moment. Sorry about that.
Great, Ally. Thanks.
We're moving fast today.
Hey, I'm here. Whoop.
All right, I can go ahead and keep sharing since I'm up already.
Okay, let me find out where I'm at here. Okay. Hold on, let me get myself
There
up.
you are.
Hey, there I am.
Welcome, Scott.
Well, thank you. Well, that was quick. I was thinking I was on for a little bit here. Well, good evening, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. I'll keep this briefing brief. I only have 6 slides. So next slide. Okay, so each year the city identifies potential comprehensive plan amendments for review and consideration and possible adoption. At a minimum, the city must amend the capital facilities element annually to reconcile the capital facilities plan with the 6-year capital improvements program as required by the Growth Management Act. Other amendments are initiated by city staff as needed, including consideration of land use change request via community initiative amendment request, park acquisitions, and other miscellaneous housekeeping amendments. This year, we have 3 city-initiated amendments request and no community-initiated requests to consider. The first is the annual amendments to the comprehensive or annual amendments to the capital improvements plan tables of the capital facilities element. Second, we have a land use and zoning map amendments associated with recently acquired park property. And lastly, we have the proposed land use amendment of the Houghton Park and Ride properties recently approved for acquisition. Next slide. The capital facilities plan updates reflect necessary amendments to maintain consistency with the 2023-2028 capital improvement plan and the 2023 to 2024 budget. The changes relate to updates to the city work program, project timing and or cost, and changes to project funding sources. And Council has received a briefing on this topic in the last meeting, and also had a study session this evening on these capital facilities. Next slide. In September, City Council authorized the purchase of the James G. Fisk property located on 6th Street South, adjacent to and in support of the Cross Kirkland Corridor. With this amendment, this low-density residential property will be changed to park and open space and will require amending the zoning map from RS 8.5 to park and open space. Next slide. Additionally, in October, the City Council authorized purchase of the Houghton Park and Ride site, which was closed in February by King County due to low utilization. The acquisition would support future community-oriented uses, including a potential location for affordable housing. Staff's proposed transit-oriented development land use would support future community-oriented development, including a community facility, affordable housing, or mixed use. This land use designation is also aligned with the comprehensive plan policy, Bridle Trails Policy BT8, which encourages future transit-oriented development that includes pedestrian connections within the site and to adjacent streets. No zoning amendments are proposed at this time, but will be developed in the next several months. Next slide. As for next steps, the Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on the annual comprehensive plan and zoning map amendments tomorrow. Staff will bring the Commission's recommendations for consideration and possible adoption at the Council's December 12th meeting. That concludes my presentation. If the Council has any questions.
Council, any questions, discussion? Great report, Scott. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
I believe that takes us
Thank you.
to our second item of business, the 2024 Sound Cities Association Regional Boards and Committee Appointments. City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So the purpose today is to have a discussion at council about the potential appointments. We're looking for council to express their interest and then primarily to identify whether there's any seats where two people are more interested. And in discussions with the mayor, should that occur, the council would not decide that, but the mayor will be asking those two members to go figure it out between themselves. So but hopefully we don't have any overlap. So here to walk you through all of this is Audrina Campbell, our Special Projects Coordinator, and then also Diana Hart, our Government Affairs Manager.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Madam Mayor.
Welcome.
Deputy Mayor, members of the council. Happy to be here tonight to kick off a conversation about the Sound Cities Association 2024 Regional Boards and Committees. And I'm happy to tell you I have a brief 6-slide presentation tonight, beginning with a little bit of background. So there are 24 regional boards and committees that do have at least one position expiring. And as the city manager just mentioned, it's important for council to be aware that if any two council members apply to the same board or committee, SCA will not take both applications. They will appoint neither. There are 6-year term limits for SCA appointments, with some exceptions, and the 6 sub-bullets shown on the screen there are SCA's criteria for deciding appointments. And as a reminder, most of this is included in the SCA FAQs attachment in your packet. Okay, don't let this slide overwhelm you. It's a lot of text. This is the list of the 24 boards and committees that have at least one expiring position, one expiring seat, excuse me. Those that are bolded represent currently held seats by Kirkland council members that are expiring. The ones that are underlined are the 2 that staff feel council should consider also applying to, given their regional policy impact and responsibilities. And the 2 that are crossed out, council already has a designated seat on them given the city's size or contractual agreement, so a second SCA appointed seat is not possible. Now, in SCA's packet of materials, they had listed the Mental Illness Drug Dependency Advisory Committee as having an expired position, but staff has confirmed that that was an oversight. And I will navigate back to this slide when council deliberates. Staff also wants to make sure council is aware that the Association of Washington Cities has extended their nomination period, their deadline for nominations to their committees as well as state boards and advisory committees. So what's on the screen is what Kirkland council members are eligible for. And like the previous slide, the ones that are bolded currently have a Kirkland council member in an expiring seat, and the 2 underlined are those that staff feel council should consider also applying for. Lastly is a high-level timeline showing what council can expect over the next month and a half. So Monday is the deadline for nominations for both AWC and SCA. Through the week of November 27th to December 1st, the Public Issues Committee nominating committee will meet and discuss. On Wednesday, December 13th, PIC will make a recommendation to the SCA board, and a week after that, on Wednesday, December 20th, the SCA Board of Directors will finalize appointments. Madam Mayor, I turn it back to you for a council discussion, and I can navigate back to this slide, but let me know if it's better if I stop sharing my screen.
Okay, I think actually staying on this slide is just fine. A couple of us have already made public, or is it just public to you and I?
I think some were shared with Diana Hart, but not everybody shared what they were considering.
So should we just kind of go down the row and talk about, actually, Deputy Mayor, I know you already prepared a document, so would you mind starting?
Sure. So I currently serve as an alternate on the Puget Sound Regional Council Transportation Policy Board and will be applying for reappointment for that. I also, given the staff recommendation that the Regional Policy Committee for King County is something there, that's something that I am also willing to apply for if other folks aren't interested. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Pascal?
So I currently serve on the Regional Transit Committee, and I'm open to having another council member serve on that committee if there is interest. It's important that Kirkland has a representative on that committee, especially in a time when transit service is in flux. And then I applied for the Transportation Improvement Board for the AWC appointment. I'm not quite sure when they actually make the appointment. I believe that's like it's probably a December date as well.
I think it follows a very similar timeline to SCA, but we can confirm.
So that's the status where I'm at.
Great. Councilmember Falcone?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I plan to reapply to the Affordable Housing Committee, the King County Affordable Housing Committee. Also, given that we just at 4 p.m. today received from SCA the likely vacancies, I did not have time to read and process that before this evening, so I would like the opportunity to be able to email with any additional interest in the coming day or two to be able to consider those other appointments. I did have one that I was interested in that I believe the mayor applied to, so I will not express that interest tonight. Similarly with the statewide appointments as well, given what you're presenting here today, I may be interested in applying for the Affordable Housing Advisory Board as well, but I need to just confirm, look for scheduling conflicts, et cetera. So if I can reserve the right to email about that as well, but I'm listening and taking notes to what everyone else is interested in to help reduce conflicts.
Absolutely. I think this is really all about making sure that we know what committees it is we want to have people on. And as Councilmember Pascal suggested, you know, if he gives up RTC, there's going to be a whole process around filling that position. So should we apply for it, we may get consideration for it, but we're all going to be waiting in line just like everybody else for these various boards. And just, I will go in line. I have applied for the Board of Health. It's a popular committee. I'm doubtful that I will be appointed to it. I also think I'm timed off of just about everything. So I have already served on emergency management for 6 years. I could probably go back to it if that was considered a priority for us, but I don't think, given our status of emergency management, I think we are far and shoulders above most cities in the region. And that is the only thing. I've also applied for the training committee at AWC. I figured with 14 years in, maybe there was something I could teach somebody else. Councilmember Curtis.
I just want to remind everybody I'm on the nominations committee, so be nice. I am currently serving on a Growth Management Planning Council and plan to re-up for that. I have been on the King Conservation District for 4 years. I'm eligible for 1 more year because I was an alternate for 3, but I'm going to step off to give other people opportunity. And I am with Councilmember Falcone. I've been a little busy. So I haven't really had a chance to look at the email we got today or decide if there's other committees I want to apply to, so I will let everyone know. And I assume that when we do apply, perhaps Diana and Andriana would like to know that we've done that and to which committee. Thank you.
You know, and I just want to make a comment. I think that Local Hazardous Waste Management Coordination Committee, I'd love to hear from staff if that was one that we wanted to consider, but I think there's only 1 elected on that committee. So it's not like a consensus building thing as much as there's a little bit of an advisory element to it. Councilmember Black.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So one quick question for Andriana. Does this list reflect the latest that we got from SCA at whatever it was, 4 o'clock?
I apologize, Councilmember Black. I have not seen that email.
Oh, okay.
And I'm seeing some shaking of heads, so
I mean,
might have to say no.
Yeah, the fact that you mentioned that mid advisory committee, I thought maybe you guys, the staff had seen that and had incorporated it here. Kind of looks like it's pretty up to date. But anyway, so I'm on the Regional Law, Safety, and Justice Committee, and I'm the caucus chair, the SCA caucus chair, and I was planning to reapply for that. And then, given my separate appointment by the council to the East Side Transportation Partnership, along with Deputy Mayor Arnold, and given Deputy Mayor Arnold's so many other regional commitments, I was willing to apply for the Regional Transit Committee if, because of the synergies there, if Councilmember Pascal was sure that he didn't want to apply for that one. And I think that covers me. Oh, I guess I do have one question for the mayor, since we're also kind of talking about AWC here as well. You are, I think, our appointee to the large city advisory group, and you want to continue in that role.
No, most of those are mayoral positions,
Yeah, so
so
that's covered.
it will be covered.
You don't want any help.
I got it covered until January, dude.
Okay, very good. No. I was just going to offer to help, that's all. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Nixon.
I will also need a couple of days before I'm sure what I might have an opportunity to do.
Thank you very much for that. With that, Andriana, Diana, do you need anything more than that?
That's all, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Falcone. Oh, sorry. Councilmember.
Oh, thank you. I just, the deadline for applying is
13th.
is Monday. So we're just going to ask when we're going to hear back that we should go ahead and apply to the ones we
I
just-
didn't hear any conflicts.
Okay.
So, Deputy Mayor, with your agreement?
Yeah, I think, it was just you and Councilmember Pascal figuring out
Yeah. Okay.
Regional Transit Committee, but that was the only one.
Okay, I'll talk to Councilmember Pascal then, just to double check and make sure.
Well, and on that list, like there's the Regional Housing Authority, that's appointed, not by SCA, it's
Right.
appointed by the
So there
executive.
are 2 or 3 SCA seats on that. It does not look like that has been flagged as one of those that will have an open seat.
Okay.
So it does not appear that that would be a open seat for consideration.
Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also had a follow-up question. So tonight we were talking about SCA and then also a little bit of AWC appointed seats. We're going to be having a similar conversation about both internal and other regional things that we appoint ourselves to, like Councilmember Black brought up, like ETP, and I'm on the East Side Human Services Forum. We have our legislative working group. We have our transportation ad hoc group. Are we going to be having a similar conversation about that at an upcoming meeting?
Actually, I assume that that will probably happen in January.
Right. We
Okay.
traditionally do that the first 2 meetings in January.
Okay. And will we follow a similar process of kind of daylighting those conversations a little bit more?
Yep, yep.
We'll have a list of what everybody is on, and then have that discussion.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I think we're done with that agenda item. That will take us to reports. I'm going to start with you again, Deputy Mayor Arnold.
A couple things of interesting note. On Friday, November 3rd, the K4C Outreach Committee had Senator Elias come talk about his transit-oriented development bill. From the legislative work group's reports before, we were concerned about that bill impacting our incentives on 85th, but from that discussion, Senator Elias really talked about the bill shifting to being more incentive-focused versus requirements that would impact 85th. And so I'm sure that Councilmember Black, who was also on that call, can bring that to the legislative work group. But it was a good discussion. And since Senator Elias was a former Mukilteo council member, he really appreciated K4C's work. It was a really worthwhile discussion with the Outreach Committee and the Senator.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Pascal.
I think the only thing that I'd like to highlight is next week we'll have the Regional Transit Committee meeting. We do take action on the 2023 System Evaluation Report. That's basically a report on how the transit system's doing. And Metro uses that to either reallocate service or add service to either underperforming routes or routes that are needing new service for growth or other things. I just note that it's a pretty stark report so far for Northeast King County. Not a lot of routes that are performing well, and they are, my fear, kind of looking at the crystal ball, is that we'll continue to have reductions over time without some type of enhancement. So that was released today, and so I was kind of consuming that earlier and not feeling good about what I was reading. But we'll see. Thank you.
Well, and I hope that continues to be a priority for the discussion that you have in the transportation subgroup, because we really do need to put pressure on the county as the station area gets closer and closer to beginning. I mean, we've talked about this a number of times, but I think we really need to build a strategy that moves us forward along with staff. Thanks. Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few comments. Had the opportunity to speak at and attend the Friends of Youth ribbon cutting for the Willows Youth Services facility, along with, it was very well attended. Some amazing Kirkland staff was there. Thank you to everyone who attended. It is just welcome. It is so awesome, the services that they're going to be able to provide, walk-in services for folks to do laundry, to take showers, you don't need to be sleeping there to use their services as well. And the message of the day was really just to help spread the word about this facility, about the work that Friends of Youth is doing, so that our youth know that there is a place for them to go to get their needs met. So welcome, and we're thrilled to have you here, Friends of Youth at the Willows Youth Services Facility. Also that same day, was able, along with some of my fellow council members, Nixon and Curtis, to volunteer at the Dia de los Muertos event, and it was awesome. It was so beautiful, so well done. Everybody was having such a great time. There was something for everybody there. There was something for children, for families, for grown-ups. It was fun activities, great photo ops, crafts for kids, wonderful entertainment, wonderful treats for everybody, and everybody had a smile on their face. The amount of just thank yous from the community to really be able to celebrate this beautiful cultural event. And so really well done. Kudos to everyone that was involved in that. It was just a wonderful celebration. Other than that, again, just to keep it brief, have the SCA board meeting next week where we'll be talking, one of our agenda items, I assume, will be the letter that we approved to send this evening. So more to come on that. Thank you.
Super, thank you. Councilmember Curtis.
Thank you. To follow up, Deputy Mayor, we had Lake Washington, well, I'm tired. Legislative Work Group had a tour with Rep. Reed, a TOD tour. Staff did an excellent job. We had a bus full of staff members and Rep. Reed. And we went up to Totem Lake and looked at some new development and then took her down the station area plan. That was very well received. Senator Elias was invited, but he wasn't able to make it. I have shared with our delegation that we did it, and a number of them are interested in us doing it again. And then Councilmember Falcone didn't mention the Fire Station 22 tour. We build beautiful fire stations. That was a great tour. And of course, the Arbor Day celebration was high on my list. So well done, staff.
Excellent. Councilmember Lack.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So let's see, just to keep things short as possible. Just a reminder to my colleagues, we did have the Racers Principals Assembly meeting just after our last council meeting. Circulated those materials. Our next Racer Principals Assembly meeting will be Wednesday, December 13th, and I will circulate the materials for that as soon as I get them. And of course, anyone is welcome and should ask me any questions they have about any of those materials or any of the things that we'll be talking about at the Racer Principals. I did want to note there's a SCA annual meeting coming up, and I think our council has to appoint a voting delegate. I'm looking at the mayor because I'm guessing she's it, but I don't know how we've done that in the past. I can't remember. We do it once a year, and I always forget exactly how we go about it.
Do you know when it is?
I do. I wrote it down here. It's Wednesday, December 6th.
Okay, let's coordinate. I don't have my calendar.
I was planning to attend, but I do not feel like I need to be the voting delegate. In fact, I'd be happy for either Councilmember Falcone or you, or frankly, any of my colleagues to be the voting
Let's
delegate.
just coordinate whoever's going to go and
Okay.
make that selection.
All right.
We'll also have meetings that may be separate from that, but we'll need a voting delegate.
Okay. Oh, the North Caucus. Yeah, I haven't seen anything about that one yet.
To be determined.
Great,
Okay. I'll just wait to hear from my colleagues. Just let me know what you guys want me to do.
great, thank you.
And I'll plan to attend as long as it doesn't cause any problems. I did want to call out that a couple of us were able to attend AWC's Civic Health Summit since our last meeting on Thursday, October 19th. And that was a meeting of folks from all over, elected officials, but also people from different organizations. And it was all about improving the health of civic discourse. And that was me and Madam Mayor and Councilmember Curtis.
You
And
want to talk about how it started?
no. Yeah, there was diverse opinions. But it was, that's what it was all about. It was all about diverse opinions, so it was wonderful. I actually did want to evangelize quickly the KPC, the Kirkland Performance Center's new annex studio. I know that some of us have had Councilmember Nixon and I know we got to tour, and I know all of us have been invited. I would just, encourage any of my council members who haven't had that tour to do it, because it's pretty cool. And then to the public, I would just evangelize it as a cool new asset for our community. So look into the new KPC studio. I did want to quickly just a couple more things related to the Senator Elias's TOD bill and the legislative work group. Just noting that legislative work group is working with staff to get a copy of Senator Elias's bill, so we're doing that, and then we're also planning to invite Senator Elias to the next tour of our TOD tour. So we're hoping that he'll be able to attend that. And with that, I am done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Nixon.
Thanks. Well, in addition to the things that have already been mentioned, I was able to represent the council at the ribbon cutting at the new University of Washington Primary Care Clinic in Kirkland. It's at the corner of 6th Street and Kirkland Way. And very large facility. And the thing that struck me most was that they've done a very good job with their art collection. It's very diverse culturally. So if you get an opportunity to visit there, ask them to show you all the different pieces of art they have throughout the whole facility. And then on the morning of Saturday the 4th, I was able to speak at another rally in Marina Park in support of freeing the captives from the October 7th event in Israel. And I was impressed there also that our Jewish community, not just in Kirkland, but on the east side, feels safe to have those kind of events in Kirkland. And I've noted at all of those recent events that the Kirkland Police Department has done an excellent job of monitoring what's going on in the vicinity. And I really appreciate the fact that KPD has stepped up to that. And I know that the attendees at the event very much appreciated it as well.
Great. Thank you for doing that. Thank you. Okay, for me, I'll wrap up. Once again, I want to thank Councilmember Pascal and his wife for a great party that we were able to put on in terms of recognizing our amazing management and director staff. Did anybody mention the police awards? We had a police awards ceremony where we gave a Medal of Valor, was that what it was? Medal of Honor to a police officer who performed an amazing feat, as was described by the chief. It's always an emotional thing to watch, and it makes you so proud of our police department. It really, it's an amazing event, and I'm so glad that they invite us. In terms of regular work, I'm also part of a group that's doing an organics stakeholder series. We're meeting every 2 weeks for 2 hours to talk about organics and how they're being managed across the country. I'm doing that sort of in conjunction with my MSWAC work. I was doing it because of the SWAC, but I'm no longer on SWAC, so I'm in the process of handing some of this off to other new SCA members who are doing SWAC. I also was invited to the two-line grand opening planning party. So it was a huge meeting in Bellevue at the Spring District to plan the opening of the 8 stations that's going to happen when we do when we go ahead with the two-line. Why I was invited was not clear to me. So I was the last one introduced, and I kind of looked around the room and I said, there are no stations in Kirkland. I said, we've moved a little dirt. That's about it. But you better all come to my party when we open the BRT station. There you go. So, yeah. So they're getting all ramped up for that. It's going to be a big deal. Also, we had, I had regional water quality, one more after this, and that is all. City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. One PowerPoint slide to share with you. The first item under the City Manager report is the planning nomenclature alternatives. The term nomenclature is submitted by our city attorney, and we thought we should include that. So just very briefly, as you know, we had our presentation, our DEIB roadmap accomplishments, and also things that we might look forward to in the next roadmap update. And one of those was looking at language that was outdated or we wanted to replace, and one of those was the term master plan. And this is not unique to Kirkland. It's something you find in planning literature if you search. It's been raised in the past. So staff wanted to suggest a process to come forward to the council and change at least that term. There's a whole lot more work to be done in working through outdated language in our documents, but that would be quite a bit of work. And during the comp plan update next year, we'll be talking a lot about the current transportation master plan, the current sustainability master plan, possibly about the CKC master plan. And so we felt that trying to change that terminology to something we all agree to going forward would be really helpful for that as a starting point. So the proposal for the council's discussion tonight is that we would come to you with the 12th with a resolution suggesting alternative language and have the council adopt that, and then we'd use that to change the titles of those documents and any plan going forward, and then also to replace the title for existing documents that has that. So examples I have up there, we're not proposing any for tonight's action, but examples of alternatives include strategy or strategic plan, governing plan, and general plan. And then the other piece that we're suggesting as part of this is that we essentially create almost a glossary of planning with hierarchy tiers. So you'd have a implementation plan or action plans would fall below these strategy plans or governing plans, which then would fall below the comprehensive plan. So the check-in is, are you okay with this idea of coming to you on the 12th with that decision? That's question number one. And question number two is, if you are, does anyone have any other alternatives you'd like us to evaluate in the next few weeks as we're putting these together? So let's question one first about the proposal.
Sounds like a plan. Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're tired, aren't we? I was just going to mention that I think this may dovetail nicely with some of the conversations we've been having about onboarding new council members and just preparing them for kind of what's ahead and giving them the big picture as we go through the list of like the hierarchy of different plans. I think it would be just nice to have that as part. I know we've discussed this as part of the onboarding to let folks know, because it can be confusing as a new council member. When do we update which plan and which plan falls under which plan and et cetera. So just wanted to mention that dovetails nicely because I know those are two kind of concurrent efforts that we're working on. So
thank you.
I think the whole concept of a hierarchy is interesting because that becomes a conflict in so many meetings that I attend or in so many bodies of work. What is the plan that's driving everything?
The one plan.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in a Parks and Rec episode right
You have never seen that show. What? Okay, any further discussion? Okay. City manager reports.
Okay, thank you. So one other action item, so thank you so much, Diana. One other action item. So you received from the city clerk, we received a sixth nomination application for the Cultural Arts Commission. The person who applied got in a little late, but it's Lana Hancock, who is also one of our Kirkland Initiative alums. And we wanted to see if the council was willing to add that to the other five. So it'll be one of the 6 positions you'd evaluate for filling the vacancy on the Cultural Arts Commission. So that's question number one of this is, are you okay with adding a late person?
Any objection? None.
So question number 2, we currently have you all scheduled to meet on November 30th to do interviews, but you also have the option under your rules to pick a subcommittee to winnow from 6 down if you so choose. And so currently we have you all doing it and basically interviewing all 6 people, but we wanted to check in and see if the council is okay with that or whether you'd like to try to.
I think the question is, do you want to do a 30-minute meeting in order to make it a 30-minute longer meeting, or do you want to just all do the extra 30 minutes? Deputy Mayor Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would propose that we interview all the candidates. I was looking through the resumes, and I would have a hard time if I was selected on a committee to choose to be able to narrow. So I think we have a number of interviews to do and a tough choice to make. And so I would plan that we just go ahead with the scheduled meeting on the 30th.
30th.
Okay with everybody? Councilmember Curtis?
Yes. Yes, I agree with go ahead and do all 6. I just want to say, I don't mean to be a big meanie, but we let this late application, we're going to be pushed the next time, so let's just be thoughtful when we've agreed to accept this late application, but don't let this be a precedent.
I agree with you.
That's fair. And this is an out-of-cycle recruitment process, but I think that's a fair point.
And I think because it's an out-of-cycle process, that makes some sense. Okay, wait a minute.
Okay, so then last question for you all. Is any calendar updates? Then I have one update on Racer. So first, but calendar update from anyone?
See none, other than I will be gone.
So the racer update I want to provide as the president. So at our Racers Principals Assembly, Councilmember Black highlighted that he had had some conversations, and maybe some of you have as well, about Redmond's interest in joining Racer. We learned that at the last Redmond meeting, they actually adopted a resolution, I haven't actually read it yet, formally requesting to be evaluated for joining Racer and laying out how they would be interested. So when Councilmember Black raised that, we recognized as the Racer Board, we actually don't have any criteria for when someone would join or when we'd be ready. There's a couple things identified in the interlocal agreement. The first says that someone joining cannot impact the service levels of the existing cities. And so one of the things that we briefly talked about at the last board meeting is we should get some stuff written down about exactly what is that and how would we evaluate that, right? So that's probably the single biggest thing. The second thing is we're not at full staff yet, so we're sort of figuring out how you would even tell someone what it would take to join. We're not at that place yet. So the rules say that we couldn't even consider it till the year is up. The year would be up in January, but the board is going to be thinking through what additional probably time and criteria we need before that's really possible to say, we know what we're asking of you when we ask you to join, and we know how we can assure that that isn't going to diminish service in the existing area. So we're all extremely excited about the fact that someone wants to join. Our whole goal, of course, is that this be eventually countywide and statewide. But so it's an interesting conundrum, flattered, but also like, we weren't expecting it that fast. So the board is definitely talking it through, and I just wanted to keep you all updated as we do that.
Great, and I have heard some interest coming from Woodinville as well.
And that's all I have then, Madam Mayor.
Okay, excellent. That takes us therefore to our second items from the audience. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it is an additional time in our regular meeting when we normally can hear from the public on matters that are not quasi-judicial or otherwise scheduled for public hearing on our agenda, and assuming the rest of our meeting has been concluded before 10 p.m. Is there anyone? No, Aaron says, from the public who wishes to make comments? Anybody online? Thank you very much. Then I believe that takes us to, we will now go into a closed session to discuss collective bargaining. We will expect to reconvene our regular meeting at approximately
Say 20 minutes top, so 9:12.
9:12. Okay.
Thank you.
Like 9 o'clock. Yeah.